All right, recording in progress.
All right, live from the trailer.
It's Friday. It's not Friday night yet. I don't know. You and I have been in all different types of time zones over the last few weeks, and
I know, and we're back in the same time zone.
now we're back in Pacific time zone, and we're not doing it at 6 o'clock. We're doing it earlier.
Really?
Go figure.
Yes. So, John, welcome back to the continental United States.
Yeah.
Congratulations on finishing another 70.3.
Yeah. Yeah.
I know it was a tough one. We were just talking beforehand, and you were telling me about the amount of people doing that did it under 5 hours, which is
Yeah.
unbelievable. It was that tough of a race. Was it? You said 50 people?
Yeah, so less than 50 people under 5 hours. There were 3,000 people who registered for the race. It sounded like about 1,500, somewhere around there, checked in for the race. And it may have only been 1,300 or 1,400 that started the race. So, you wake
Wow.
up and I know the conditions were not PR. It was not a PR day right from the beginning. And so it was interesting. A lot of people, maybe they didn't even intend to start, but they still had all their reservations and everything booked, and so maybe they still ended up in Hawaii but just decided not to race. And who knows? I mean, we've deferred this race so many times. I don't even know which race this came from, tell you the truth, because it was one deferred after another. So it may have been that people just weren't fit, but they still had the reservations and were here in Hawaii. So 1,300 people roughly started, and just over 1,000 finished. So pretty
Number one,
high
that's a
DNF
really
rate.
small field. And
It
number
is.
two,
Yeah.
that's a high DNF rate.
It's
That's
a
like
high DNF. Yeah.
25%.
Once you get up around 20-25%, I mean that's pretty significant in terms of a DNF. So yeah, it was a fun day.
So we obviously we talked last week before the race, and we are talking about some of the things that potentially could happen. We mentioned about the weather and that wasn't supposed to be windy.
No, the wind was only going to be around 10 miles per hour, which is okay. 10 miles per hour that's a good wind, but for that
Yeah.
course, that's nothing. And the temperatures were actually going to be high 70s, maybe low 80s, and that all changed in a heartbeat. But it's Hawaii, it's like,
That's Hawaii. Yep.
yeah, a
Yeah.
wind came over the mountain, and actually the night before, there was a fire on the other side of the island, and the wind was blowing from that side back over to where we were, and you just smelled this fire, and all of a sudden it's like, what else are we going to get?
Exactly. Wow. So it got windy.
Yeah.
It got windy on the swim too. From my understanding, the swim was really tough.
Right from the beginning. The swim was interesting because not only was it windy and the waves weren't too bad, at least when I went. I was fourth or fifth wave out, so pretty early in the race. And then there was waves going on an hour after me. So
Yeah, my understanding it got pretty bad.
yeah, I think it just kept getting the wind. And I saw this in the morning when I looked at the weather report. The wind just kept predicted to get faster and faster throughout the day. And so my waves were not bad, and I don't swim there enough to really understand the tides and the currents. But there were some significant currents. I actually found myself swimming with someone who's swimming about the same pace as me. And you look over, you can see the person's stroke, and you sort of gauge, okay, this is a good swimmer. You can just see the way they're swimming. Well, the way we were swimming, we were sometimes like this, and then all of a sudden we'd be like this, and then we're like this, and like this. It was just like, depending on where we got caught, we were moving all over. So it was really tough to navigate going through the course. So
Wow. And then the bike course obviously was windy, crosswinds. You are the master of the crosswind though.
yeah, yes. The thing with this course is it's on sort of the northwest part of the island. And what happens is the winds, when they come across from the east, they whip around the volcano and they sort of come back around and then swirl, sort of like on the backside of the volcano. And so really when the winds get that high, it's really hard to know what direction they're going to hit you from. So I love Wind Finder, and I just look at how the winds are predicted to go and what direction they're going to go. And so I really, spent some time just looking at that. And
do you think in that context, with that amount of geography, that Wind Finder's even somewhat accurate?
you're right. And I don't know. I don't know how many actual weather stations they're relying on to get those data points. So it is sort of a rough estimate, but in my mind, it at least gave me a sense of probably the expected direction. But when you're in there, and this is what makes it so tough, is just like down at Lake Mead, you'll have two, sort of a valley that you're coming through, crossing through it, and that wind can just get stuck in there, and you'll be fine, no wind, and then all of a sudden you get hit with this gust. And that's the dangerous part. And that's why in that course, they don't let you use disc wheels at all, because it's the unpredictable nature of the magnitude and the direction of the wind that makes that tough.
I still contend that like a 90 millimeter front, 90 millimeter back is more dangerous than a shallow front and a disc wheel.
Yeah,
Right?
I would agree.
And they allow the 90 millimeters. They even, Zip for a while made that 1080.
Yeah.
And the people were running that in the front in Kona. Yeah. And to me, like, that's way more dangerous.
Yeah.
So it's interesting that, we have these arbitrary rules that are not really based on science. They're based
I had no problem with controlling my front wheel. Now I ride with that wheel a lot. And so I really spend a lot of time getting used to the deepness of that wheel and the crosswinds. And that's important. But I think you're right. I think they made that rule back when more people maybe were even using deeper wheels than what I had. Yeah. And they're, I can't, hard to control. It's not because of the disc, it's because of the deepness of the front wheel.
Yeah, I agree. And we've talked about that before. And they're never going to change that over there. It's just it's in the culture now. But mm-hmm. I just find it interesting that they, and I think that that's part of the reason people fear disc wheels.
Yeah.
Because in Kona you can't ride a disc because of the crosswinds.
Mm-hmm.
But
now that being said, I think our tri bikes are really built for a headwind or a very narrow yaw.
Yeah.
So like even my bike, my frame has a bigger profile from the side, and so we and we've talked about this before. CDA, we typically think about CDA with the wind coming, really in front of us, but when the wind's hitting the crosswind, that CDA is based upon that profile.
Exactly.
And when you have a lot of flat surfaces that wind's hitting, it can accumulate. And we did have some people. There was at least 3 people that were blown off course, and that I heard about during the race. It's tricky. You just don't know when that wind's going to hit you.
No, it's true. And once again, we're in the fortunate group where we live in a windy place that has this. Yeah. And like, I'm like you, I ride a lot at Red Rock, and we get the same things, and you're going pretty fast and you get these little gusts and unpredictable directions. Yeah. But you learn how to cope with it. You almost get like a little bit of an early warning. Like you can feel it when you've done it enough, right?
Yeah.
You feel the front wheel just start to go, and then you can counter steer. But if you don't practice that,
no, that's right. And probably on Red Rock, you get a lot of cars that pass you too, which if you've got that wind, that can add to the unpredictable nature of what's going to happen.
Yeah. Or even descending like Potosi, for example.
Oh, yeah.
A long open descent and a truck goes by you, or a motorhome. Mm-hmm. Those have actually been my scariest situations, is the trucks and motorhomes when I'm descending at 40 miles an hour in a crosswind.
Right. Because then once they go by you, there's just pocket of air low pressure that you just get sucked into.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, actually, when I was coming down Hawi, there's a number of people just sitting up on their bullhorns, just trying to control, or try to be in control, or have the confidence that they're in control. But fortunately, I was able to stay in my aero coming down for the most part. I'd sit up every now and then, and I'd keep an eye on anyone who's up ahead of me.
Exactly.
And I'd look for any movement of that person.
Yep.
Because then I'd be, that, like you talked about, that would at least give a little bit of a heads up to say, okay, I'm about to be hit.
Yeah, no, that's big in a race like that. If you can see it happening 10, 15 yards in front of you, it's going to happen to you.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, that's a really good, that's a pro tip right there for sure. Yeah. If we talk about nothing else today, that actually might be the tip of the day.
Yeah, well, and it's good. And then the other thing I did is I wrote about this. I turned my computer into map mode.
Yeah.
And again, thinking about how Windfinder was showing those winds, I was trying to get a sense of, am I just feeling a crosswind now, or is this a headwind, or is this a tailwind? Because it's such a tricky wind to. And for me, I put a lot of emphasis on what I'm thinking about during the race, and so I want to try to have a sense of where I'm going and what's coming up.
Well, John, I think it's really interesting that you mentioned that because, and people might not recognize this either, is you and I wear the same helmet, right? We were the Giro Arrowhead.
Yeah.
And when that's on, you cannot sense the wind nearly as much.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
Your ears and face are kind of covered. And it's amazing. It's amazing the feeling and how different it is.
Yeah.
Because you're not feeling like most people, you feel the wind on your face and in your ears.
Yeah.
Right. And you start covering that up and you can't sense it as nearly as much. So I think it's something that people need to think about, especially if you've never really rode in an Aero helmet and maybe you're only going to do it for a race.
Yeah.
Is to recognize that the wind does feel different.
That is a great point. And that's again, if you're talking about pro tips, that's a great point. But that's what I like about the helmet too, is you get in this little bubble. Yeah. And it takes away some of that perception of how hard you may be working because you're not feeling that wind.
You're not feeling
during the race. What I actually did is I took my visor off and flipped it up in several areas just to sometimes I was getting too much sweat buildup and I knew I wasn't getting enough ventilation. And if I'm going to race there again, I'm getting a different helmet because I just did not have enough ventilation.
Really? Because you have the vented version.
What's that?
You have the vented version of that helmet. I have the non-vented version.
Yeah, it's got some good vents, but it was not venting enough. In fact, once I turned on hot V, I could actually feel how hot my head was getting. So I stopped quickly at the next aid station, took the helmet off, and just doused myself with water.
Smart.
I'm losing 15 seconds, but
what are you
gaining? 2 minutes because I'm not. I'm controlling that temperature a little bit more. So
interesting, very interesting.
So next time I'll get a helmet that I can stick the bottle in and douse myself. The problem with the Giro is I can't get the helmet. I can't have access anywhere to get water inside the helmet.
You have to hit that little vent.
Yeah, no, and I think my vent is.
I think it's like.
I got to think about where it is. Yeah.
Two of them. It's interesting. I think it's laser. They now have an Aero helmet with a hole that you can actually squirt water in.
Oh, nice.
And I'm like, oh, that's a great idea.
Yeah.
Think about it. If every aid station you can just slow down, grab a bottle of water, and squirt it in your helmet.
Yeah.
That's gonna help for sure. I don't know if it's laser. I just remember hearing about one that was pretty new that was doing that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I had a laser.
Pardon me?
Sorry, go ahead. No, I had a laser at one point. You're right. It had that spot right in the middle that I could take that and just stick it in there and douse myself internally. So
it's interesting the cost benefit between Aero and regulation.
Yeah.
I am going to give you a hard time though because you wore a black helmet.
I know.
So you bring it on yourself.
That's right.
You're like Johnny Cash when you race. You gotta have a black hat.
Well, but I did wear the Ghost kit, and that was a much lighter kit than what I normally wear.
Now, let me ask you: did you feel a difference?
In terms of coolness, or I don't know. That's hard to say. Yeah. But I will say that this is probably even though I didn't hit the time I wanted, or even what I felt I could hit. This is probably the best I've actually raced in the heat and humidity. So that may have been a contributing factor. So,
well, now we'll get you a white helmet and, or at least a baby blue helmet to go.
If I race in Hawaii again, I will get a light colored helmet.
Yeah, because it's not about fashion; it's about survival. So let's talk about the run, because we talked about last week too about how unusual
Yeah.
that surface was going to be, and I really want to know how running on the grass for that amount of time was.
I loved it. It was the grass actually was some of my favorite parts to run on because it was not a hard packed grass, but it was not a soft. It wasn't spongy.
Oh, I thought. See, I was thinking it was going to be spongy.
What's that?
I was thinking it was going to be spongy.
Yeah, no, and it wasn't. They gave us a path marked out with little flags, about 4 feet wide probably, and it was very. I liked it, but I liked it because it gave sort of a cross country feel to the race.
Yeah.
And what I didn't like is actually the cart path because it's a golf course and the cart path goes up, it goes down, it does these sharp turns. That was actually the hard part to navigate, and those quick little ups and downs. I had to really watch it going uphill. At first I thought I'd be able to run them all, but then I was like, my heart rate would just jump up too fast.
Yeah.
And I've had this problem with nausea, and so I've once my heart rate started getting too high, I could just feel that nausea coming on. And so I started walking those short uphills. Now they were only sometimes 20 yards long, but
you're absolutely right about the cart paths in the COVID era when golf courses were closed, I banditoed my local golf course.
Oh, nice.
And Cosmo and I got on, and we were like, okay, we're going to run the 18 on the cart path.
Mm.
And this is a relatively flat golf course.
Yep.
Man, were we up and down and sharp turns and sharp turn and up and down. And by the end of it ended up being just over 10K. I was beat.
Yeah.
Because we're not used to the 4 foot climb, 4 foot descent, 4 foot climb. It's amazing.
No, and the way Justin, who ended up winning it, the way he described the course, and I liked it. He called it punchy.
Yeah.
And it was punchy because you did have to punch it at times. You get up this hill.
Or you felt like you got punched.
Felt like you got punched. And actually, I'll tell you, by the third loop, because there's a 3-loop course, I was actually walking some of the downhills because it was too hard to control going downhill. And I was getting more worried that I was going to wipe out or something. And so I was even taking it easy on that part. So,
yeah, I don't think I would enjoy that.
Yeah, it was hard to get into a groove. But the heat and humidity was forcing me to do a walk run anyhow. So it wasn't too big of a deal for me. It's not like I would have run 10 minutes faster. But it was interesting trying to find yourself to get into a pace.
Well, John, we're not going to talk about the results or anything like that. I mean, I know you did what you did, and I know you're pleased with the finish and getting done. But what I really want to talk about is the next race and the time between these two races. So you have made a interesting decision to race a full Ironman 3 weeks after a half.
Right.
And you've done big races like this before, with short time between, but you've done it where you did a full and then a half, right?
And that didn't work too well.
Is this your first time doing a half and then a full within 3 weeks?
Yeah, this time. So I went back and looked at some of my racing. We had a little bit of a long flight, so Laura and I were reviewing where we had been, and we talked about doing Austria, and then came back and we did Louisville, and that was 6 weeks between Austria 70.3 and Louisville, and I had at Louisville one of my best races.
Yeah, and
so it's funny because actually I didn't realize that was that far away, but 6 weeks was still a relatively quick turnaround, but that was a big flight coming back and some time off.
And a lot of beer and strudel and stuff and pretzels in Europe after the race.
Yeah. And I crashed after here in town after Austria and wiped out. So that added to, so that 6 weeks got a little shorter, but yeah. And it's funny, looking at the races this year, again, because 2020 was deferral after deferral. we did talk about, well, okay, so because Coeur d'Alene is actually a result of St. George.
Oh, it is.
Yeah.
From the 2020.
Yeah, 2020, that, and then we deferred to Coeur d'Alene. And we had already deferred to Hawaii in June 2021. And so then you looked at it and said, okay, well, 3 weeks. And, Hawaii, it typically only has one slot per age group for Kona. And so at that point, I'm like, yeah, that's fine. Let's do, it's not like I'm going to go to Hawaii and try to kill it and just sort of progress into Coeur d'Alene. That's how I approached it a year ago. Yeah. So obviously things changed, and all of a sudden there's multiple Kona slots dumped into, Hawaii, which adds a little bit of pressure. Yep. Self-imposed, of course. And so that, but I didn't get a slot, and it was disappointing. I wasn't in contention at all. And so that actually starts me worrying about what's going to happen to Coeur d'Alene. I had more than one moment after finishing Hawaii whether or not I should even do Coeur d'Alene.
Right.
But I signed up for it, so I got to do it.
Yeah. So I did a double before on 2 weeks. I did the ITU Long Course Worlds, which was it's about half the distance between.
That's right.
And a half.
Is that the Penticton one?
Penticton.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then 2 weeks later, I raced 70.3 Worlds in Chattanooga. And that was a really tough turnaround to do that.
How did you do it? Like, what did you do after Penticton?
I cried a lot. Well, actually, the weird thing was, John, Penticton was one of my crowning achievements of my life.
Yeah.
I got third place in the World Championship, and I had a great run. It was a 30K run, and I was smoking it. Like, I had a great run, great bike. And so I felt really good about myself.
Yeah.
Except for I lost a toenail and I got infected.
Oh no!
And so pretty much the 2 weeks between, I couldn't put a shoe on almost.
Oh no!
And and I hate to take antibiotics, and I actually had to go on to a course of antibiotics.
Yeah.
And even the day before the next race, I couldn't decide on shoes because I couldn't find a shoe that my foot wouldn't hurt in. And then
did you consider cutting out the toe box?
I did. And then, but I finally found an Ultra.
Okay.
And this was like the fifth shoe or sixth shoe I went through that actually it didn't cause any pain. Mm-hmm. So I did a few runs before and a few bikes in between, a couple swims, but I did very, very little.
Yeah.
But mostly it was because of the toe infection. Like I was like, I'm not going to be able to race if this thing, if your big toe is infected, it just there's no way. But like everything's bought and paid for, right?
That's right. That's right.
And my family was driving from Canada to Chattanooga, and so I'm like, well, like I'm in. So, but I did not perform as well at Chattanooga. But I think it's the long distance and the short distance.
That's right, because the ITU Worlds, you said 30K, so that's an 18-mile run. What was the bike? I forget what the bike is.
120K.
120K, so 90, that's
60. No, it's like 75 miles.
Yeah, 75 miles, and then the swim is still long too.
Yeah, it was 3K.
Yeah. So going from long course to a 70.3, that's a big ask.
And then when we got to Chattanooga, I did ride the course twice, not the full course. I did do that. It was really hilly and very technical in some spots, so I really wanted to get out and do that. Yeah. But John, it was interesting, right? Because my fitness was good, but my it was almost like my neurologic system was not. And I think maybe, I don't know, like going 2 times like that close was more of a neural fatigue issue than a fitness fatigue.
And fitness, yeah, right. No, for sure, because your fitness, even if you stop training for 2 weeks, you're going to lose fitness, but not at their main fitness. Your core fitness is still going to be there.
Yeah. But like I can remember, on the run, like having cramping issues, which I didn't have in Penticton.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
once again, I think it was like that more of the neural
Yeah.
side of things.
Yeah.
And so looking back, I told myself, I'm never going to do two races like that back to back again.
Mm-hmm.
But I would consider what you're doing with the 3 weeks between
Yeah.
70.3, because I think that there is a difference between the 70.3 and
Yeah.
like mid distance.
I still have all my toenails.
You have your
That's
toenail.
fun.
You're not injured. I mean,
No.
you're. So I think that as long as you come away that first race uninjured,
Yeah.
and that's the gamble I think for most people is, can you actually, if you do sign up for a double like this, can you get through the first race uninjured? Because if you
Yeah.
get injured in that first race, there's not enough time
Mm-hmm.
to really do much about it other than do nothing.
Right. Right. Yeah, and I think you're spot on, and I think it's good to clarify injury type.
Yes.
I think, well, which type of injury are you? You're. I'm guessing. I know you're thinking more like an acute, twist an ankle, pull a
Yep.
muscle,
Yep.
type of injury, as opposed to that
Nope.
damage that you
Yeah.
accumulate in a
Yeah.
race.
No, I'm thinking more like an injury that, yes,
Yeah.
a pulled muscle, sprained
Yeah.
ankle, losing a toenail,
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Right.
even a severe sunburn. People, I've read some articles
Yeah.
on people, they do it back to back and they got a really bad sunburn in the first, and people don't recognize that a sunburn is a lot of stress on your
Yeah.
body,
That's right. Your
and
skin. Yeah.
recovering from that takes a
Mm-hmm.
lot of energy.
Yeah.
But so yeah, I think if you come out of the first one unscathed, I think it's actually really cool because you actually have the ability to actually gain fitness from the first race.
Mm-hmm.
You actually
I
get
think so.
you can get a training bump from the first race.
Yeah.
I do think, and John, I don't know if you thought about this, but the taper of the first race, I think, should also be relatively short.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you 2 week taper, you're losing fitness. You
Right.
race, then you take another week of easy.
Mm-hmm.
It's actually 3 weeks of down. So I think that I'd try, if it were me doing it again, I think I would try a 1 week shorter taper on the first race rather than normally I do 2 weeks. And
Yeah, and that's about what I did.
yeah,
I did a slight taper 2 weeks out, but slight taper meaning I just didn't do a really long stuff.
yeah,
I still did some long stuff, and then so really it turned out to be about a week and a half. With the travel, getting to Hawaii, we had a little front end time,
yeah,
so just took it easy that week. So yeah, that's about the right window
yeah.
that I was looking at.
So then, you know, this is the $1 million question is, so then what's the training plan and what dictates the training plan for you right now in between these two races? Because you have 2 weeks, right? Between now
Yeah.
and Coeur d'Alene. So what's
Well, so what my plan was is not to necessarily have a strong plan, and I was going to be ready to modify as needed. But what my plan was is after 70.3 to take the next week and just be really easy. Maybe take a few days off entirely, which is what I ended up doing. Well, for the most part, I still swam because I'm
you
in
did?
Hawaii.
You guys were in Hawaii.
I'm going to swim.
The ocean is right there.
Yeah, we were right on the ocean. I'm like, I'm just going to go float in the waves and look at the fishies.
Yeah.
and that was great for recovery, I thought, both for lower body and upper body. But I needed to also make sure I ate well, try to recover nutritionally. And then after that week, then I would have really one more week that I could do sort of a build, if you will, get in some long stuff, and then back off for the final week prior to the race. So it was that second week from the race, and that's where I'm entering after this week, that I'm still questioning how much I want to do, how much I do this weekend and next weekend. Yeah. And I was sort of going to gauge it based upon how I felt.
I think next weekend is going to be the tricky one.
Yeah.
I think this weekend it probably won't make a difference either way. In my opinion, I think it's next weekend is the key.
I think you're right, and I think that, and I think you're thinking about it the same way. The challenge of this weekend is: do I accumulate damage from the race, and then do I set myself backwards, as opposed to setting myself forward? Because that's what got to recover, and then allow time to build just a little bit, and then recover and race. So
yeah. So John, there's two in my experience. There's two ways you can kind of handle this, right? Like you could say, okay, this weekend we're gonna go long, slow.
yeah.
Right. And what I mean by that, I mean like zone 1 heart rate, power, but go long, right? Go 5, 6 hours.
Yeah.
That builds up a lot of fatigue, but the chances of injury are relatively low. The other way you go is go short fast.
Yeah, right.
Right? Because short fast also doesn't really build up that much fatigue on the system. And I'm thinking like doing like 40-second, 20-second, like the short intervals with short recovery. Your whole workout's going to be 40 minutes, and you hit it. You get that cardiovascular benefit. You get some benefit to your legs, but it's not enough to actually, fatigue you. I think the danger that people run into is once again into that mid range, right?
Yeah.
Is they're like, oh man, I'm ready to go. I just did this race. I'm good. I got decent fitness, and they get into that zone 3, the tempo stuff, and I think that's the danger zone here. I don't know what you think.
No, I think you're spot on. Is trying to do one or the other. I'll probably I'm going to lean more towards the long, slow. Because I am still I'm not as fully confident that I can do some of the high intensity stuff without incurring some injury.
But I think if you could do it swimming and on the bike, I wouldn't do it running.
No, that's good.
I think you could do it swimming for sure. You get that cardiovascular stimulus by doing some 25s and some 50s and.
No, that's actually a great point. What I'm probably going to be doing this week, I did it today, was run in the water as well.
Yeah.
And just try to accumulate a little bit of muscle work that way without the impact.
What about would you consider doing an elliptical?
I probably would. We actually did some research early on the elliptical trainer and what that looked like from a muscle activity perspective and a kinematic. And, of course, there's some similarities because you're alternating your legs, but there are actually some pretty unique differences, mostly the way that the machine delivers resistance.
Yeah.
And that was actually the tricky part in doing some of our research, was trying to equate the resistance on an elliptical and a treadmill. Because on an elliptical, you don't really have speed like you do on a treadmill. Yeah, you've got a fixed stride length, and you can manipulate how fast you're cycling, but there's also a setting on the elliptical, the one we were working on, that could go up or down.
Yeah.
And up actually didn't equate with up on a treadmill, because up actually, in essence, made it a little easier because now you're using gravity to move the pedals. And then there was also a resistance setting. So I think the tricky thing is with the elliptical is making sure you have an understanding of how to manipulate the resistance. Yep. And I think if people use it regularly, they can dial in what the settings would need to be to get the right resistance. I think I haven't used one enough that I'd be able to jump on and say, here's where I want to be. But I do have a body weight support treadmill.
You do have access to that.
But go use that. I don't know.
That's not a bad idea. That's not a bad idea either, right? Especially if you wanted to do some like higher speed stuff, you'd actually be having like higher impacts.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and I think that speaks to your point of the neurological part. And I always worry about that with some of the slow run that I do, is neurologically, I'm not training how I want to run. I may be training my durability, but I'm not training that pace. And so, I don't know, maybe I need to get down on that body weight support treadmill and do a little bit of faster than race pace training.
Yeah, interesting. So so this week will be somewhat how you feel to a certain extent, right?
Yeah, very much so. But and this is where I can run into trouble, and I can hopefully just watch myself, is because the problem is, like, I don't know if I said it here or we talked about it earlier. I questioned whether or not I should do Coeur d'Alene after I finished Hawaii. I'm like, maybe it's just not in the cards to get a full done. But everybody struggled in the heat. Well, maybe there were a couple of people who didn't, but a lot of the times were much slower. So everyone, a lot of people were struggling with the conditions. But yeah, I did question whether or not. But what was my response? I signed up for it. I got to do it. And so that's my problem. Is sometimes I put things down on paper, and then I've got to do that workout.
I'm clapping because that's every triathlon, right? Like every triathlete. John, I can't tell you how easy it is for me to build a Strava route.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm gonna ride 70 miles, and I'm out 50 miles. I'm like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
I'm done. Yeah. And it's like, well, I built it. I got to finish those 20 miles.
I know.
Like it's something as simple as that, but on paper, in your mind's eye, it's like, oh, this is really doable. And then and maybe that's the dangers of signing up for things early, or even like, coaching yourself or being coached, right?
That's right.
Is on paper, things look very doable and very easy, right? It's, maybe it's not easy to put your credit card down for $750 for an Ironman.
Right.
That's not the easy part, but really the whole thing only takes about 3 minutes from the time you start to the time you end. And it's it's really easy at that point when you're 2 weeks out and you're recognizing, you're coming to reality that, oh man, I'm going to be out there all day.
Yeah, right.
And this is, this is quite a commitment. But then on the other hand, you have it's only one day.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Yep. You've got a lot of days in your life, and this is just one.
That's right.
No,
and I think having that right mindset is important to enjoy it. And even though when we did Hawaii, it's hell in paradise. But you're in paradise, so
but you're in paradise.
I'm in Hawaii and I'm racing, and how that's. And, I've got to approach Coeur d'Alene the same way, is to try to make sure that it's going to be enjoyable. And
well, number one thing is Coeur d'Alene is also paradise. I was just there.
It is beautiful. Yeah.
Marie and I were looking at property to buy so we could go live there.
Interesting. Yeah.
It's to me, Coeur d'Alene is paradise.
Yeah. Yeah.
I ran along the lake. And I ran on the Ironman. I did like 1/3 of the loop, and I've ran it before because I've raced there. And I'm just like, that 12K I ran felt like it took 10 minutes. It was just, it's so green and beautiful. The trees are beautiful, and the lake is there. It was 60 degrees.
Yeah.
Coeur d'Alene to me is one of the very special places in the world.
Yeah.
I would say, if you actually asked me, if I had a choice, you can go to Kona or you can go to Coeur d'Alene, and I had a week to go, I would choose Coeur d'Alene 90% of the time. Because to me, that's beauty, and that's paradise. So you're going to another place of paradise. It's just a different.
Oh, no doubt. And I've been there before, and you're right, it's beautiful. And for you, it's a quick shot up to Canada.
Yeah. Oh, it was so tough when we actually stayed near Sandpoint. I don't know if you know where Sandpoint is, but it's a city about 45 minutes north of Coeur d'Alene, and we started to see Canada border 60 miles away.
Oh,
and and that's the area of Canada I'm from. And I was like, man, we should have brought our passports.
Yeah, right.
But the restrictions are still pretty harsh to go into Canada. We would have to quarantine ourselves. So anyways, it wouldn't have worked out, but I was really feeling that, because even as a child, some of our summer vacations would be to go to Sandpoint and Coeur d'Alene and that area. And so, I was definitely feeling that.
Yeah, no, it's good. And you sent me some pictures of the course, and I was already jealous. And So this is what's interesting, and obviously there's a lot of forum talk on World Championship in Kona. The challenge of that course, yeah, it's hilly, but the challenge of that race is the environment. It's the wind and the humidity and the temperature.
Because that course, that course, I mean, same profile somewhere else, it wouldn't be nearly as.
Yeah, the allure of racing Kona is all the stories that are connected to that race, and that's neat. And running down Ali Drive, and it just that's, you just think in your mind all the world championship races that were there and all the epic stories that happened. But yeah, I'm very much looking forward to, like I think when we talked last week, Hawaii 70.3 was never on my radar because heat and humidity is just not something I go, oh, that I do really well in that type of environment. Let's go. I'm the opposite. I'd love to go to Coeur d'Alene, and if it's cool.
Well, John, honestly, it never got above 70 the entire time we were there.
Yeah.
But that's an area like this whole, where I'm at now, I'm in Portland. The same thing is you can go from 60 to 90.
I know.
In one day. It's not, they have weather here, right? Like not like in Las Vegas where, it's going to be between 90 and 110 all summer.
That's just I can be a weatherman here.
It's very easy to be a weatherman in Las Vegas. But here and in the Pacific Northwest, like, because you lived in the Pacific Northwest, and it can change 30 degrees in a day. And you could easily get a day in Coeur d'Alene in 2 weeks, which is 55 degrees and raining.
And
you can get 90 degrees in sunshine.
Yeah. Well, and that's happened.
But the good thing about Coeur d'Alene is you get shade on the run in a lot of it.
Oh, is it? Oh, good. Yeah, it was it 4 years ago where they had the 100-degree, they almost canceled because of the heat.
Yeah.
So,
but it was later. I think this is earlier.
Oh, okay.
I think that was in July.
Okay. Yeah.
So the Coeur d'Alene full used to be in July. I could be wrong with this. I'm pretty sure. And the 70.3, because they used to run both.
That's right.
Was in June. I did the 70.3 in June, and it was 75 degrees.
Mm-hmm.
It was a beautiful day, like a gorgeous day. So I think you're more likely to get 75 degrees.
Yeah.
Or 90.
Right.
But you could also get 55, which for you would be perfect.
I would enjoy struggling with that.
Handlebars, because you can always put on more clothes, right?
Yeah, right. Well, and people are talking on the message boards right now about getting out of the water. The water is a little chilly. You swam in it?
I didn't this time, but last time I did.
Okay.
And it was the same weekend.
Yeah. High 60s, low 70s, maybe.
Well, Marie and I were talking about, she thinks she went without a wetsuit because she actually did a relay.
Mm-hmm.
It was chilly.
Yeah.
But it was 68, 69.
Mm-hmm.
And the water is perfect. Like it's so clear, you could see. Yeah. To me, like it's a very special place.
Oh, that's great.
You haven't raced there before?
I've not raced there. No, I've been through there a few times. Stayed in Coeur d'Alene for a conference one time, and we're right on the lake there. And I can't remember which hotel it is, but it was right on the lake, and it's beautiful.
Well, the only thing with Coeur d'Alene is the time you can actually swim in the lake is relatively short. Like we were just there and we talked to people, and it was cold. Like we put our feet in. Cosmo jumped in, but we swam in a pool.
Oh, nice. Okay.
And
so that's interesting because I am deciding which wetsuit to take.
You'll want sleeves.
Yeah.
Well, are you using thermal or non-thermal?
That's right. I've got a thermal, and I've got a few in my arsenal now. So
I think non-thermal.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, because I'm guessing it'll be between 68, 69, right around there. Yeah. So that's awesome. And then the bike course. Well, we can talk more about it the week or the day before you race. But the bike course is also it's awesome. It's beautiful.
Yeah. It looks like about 7,000 feet of climbing. So
7,000.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I could see that. But no big climbs. It's just rollers.
Big
rollers.
I was just looking at the map, and you're right. It doesn't look like any real long sustained ones. So
you get lots of rest.
Yeah. So that
I'm actually jealous of you because I really would like to race that race now.
Oh yeah, great. Well, they dumped, and as we talked, they dumped more Kona slots into that one. So
I was thinking about that, right? So I was like, well, let's say I was gonna race it and I qualified for Kona. I couldn't do Kona anyways. I got Ironman California, like basically the same day.
When is it?
I think it's October 19th.
Oh.
So can't. That's my routine now. But anyways, John. So other than that, any other plans that you think that are important for people to know between two races?
Yeah,
you did mention. I want to actually go back to the nutrition side because I think that's another thing that's really, really important. You briefly said it, getting good nutrition in.
Yeah.
So during these 3 weeks, what are you kind of emphasizing with your nutrition?
So I really wanted to after the race, just eat healthy and eat. We were still in Hawaii at the time, and so obviously we're not preparing our own meals at that point, but just trying to make good choices. Not trying to, say I can eat anything, but more so, okay, let's make sure I'm getting a good burger, eating some good fish, that was easy to do. But I still avoided things like deep fried and, this or that. But then the other part and you and I have done some work in this area as well, is just thinking about recovery from a sense of thinking recovery as a priority as opposed to exercise as a priority, I think is really important. So trying to figure out how to, rest and relax without putting an additional stress on, but without doing bed rest, because bed rest is bad.
Yeah,
that's just.
But so is taking 15,000 steps in a day.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, that's right.
And when you're in Hawaii, I can almost guarantee on your trackers you could get 15,000 steps easy because you're not driving anywhere, right?
That's right.
You're walking around the village. You're walking. Yep. You're walking here. You're walking there. And next thing you know, you've done 15,000 steps, and that is not a recovery day.
No, you're right. And we were close enough to the Kona village that it was walkable and not worth driving. And so what we did do is we did walk some, which was good, but we made sure we were putting on the right shoes for walking. We just weren't wearing our flip-flops all the time. Yeah. And so I know that sounds like such a minor thing, but you walk in flip-flops, you walk differently and you put a different load on yourself. So we try to be careful there. And then if we did need to go somewhere, we would get in the car, but then we'd go somewhere else, we weren't driving a mile. We would go to a totally different area just to explore and, then to rest in the car and then get out and walk a bit too.
Yeah. But I think that's a mistake that, that people do make is they think that, they finished their race and they're in paradise. So they're somewhere and it's like, I'm going to recover, but then they're out hiking and doing this, doing that, doing that. And they didn't actually recover.
No.
They weren't running, they weren't biking, they weren't swimming, but they were touristing.
Still accumulating load. And so, like I said, I jumped in the water. I did some floating around in the water just to, want to enjoy looking at the fish, but then also with the mindset of, I got to recover and let the body, relax, because doing a 70.3, no matter how long it takes, that's a big load to put on the body, and you got to recover.
Yeah. It is a slap in your body's face.
Mm-hmm.
Really, because the thing about it, like, it's intense. You're 5 hours at just low threshold. The human body is not really meant to do that.
Yeah, no. And then I try to take in a little bit more salt afterwards too. Eating, shoyu type of ramen, and something with a lot of salt and tasty too. So.
I'm glad you mentioned that because we've talked about it in the past, but the vilification of sodium is just, especially in endurance sports, is dangerous and can be deadly. And I can only imagine how many milligrams of sodium you lost.
Yeah.
We've never done a sweat test on you, we don't know, but I can just imagine in 5 hours plus warming up and just hanging out afterwards, sweating.
Yeah.
the amount that you lost it's really, it would be really interesting to know exactly. But then, let's say you're not very educated and you're like, oh, but I got to eat healthy because I need to recover, and healthy stuff has no salt in it.
Right, right.
So I'm really glad that
Great point.
you mentioned that,
Mm-hmm.
because it's just a critical electrolyte for recovery. And
Mm-hmm.
people think, it's all about performance, but sodium is so important for recovery. And yeah, I'm really glad you mentioned that.
Yeah.
That's one of my big pet peeves in the eating clean world. Is,
Mm-hmm.
it's salt free, it's sodium free. I'm like, no, I want more.
Mm-hmm.
And then this in the literature in endurance sports and performance in particular, it's starting to become more out there that that we're actually running hyponatremic
Yeah.
daily. And I'm not saying having a hyponatremic episode. I'm saying like just over time, slowly getting more and more hyponatremic, and I think that is something we need to really be careful with. And the higher amounts of sodium for endurance athletes, I can't find it in the literature of any problem associated with having extra sodium.
Mm-hmm.
Your body just gets rid of it.
Right.
And I get it, like that sodium has been vilified because of blood pressure issues.
Right, right. But people with congestive
athletes,
heart failure aren't doing triathlons.
that's exactly it. Like, when's the last time you think a triathlete went into CVS and did their blood pressure and it was elevated, right?
Yeah.
If anything, it's always low.
Mm-hmm.
So no, I think that I'm really glad you mentioned that.
Well, and you and I, we have been, we've looked into the whole death in triathlon issue. And I think it is important if people do have hypertension, or if they do have congestive heart failure, but they're most likely not racing at that point. You do need to pay attention to that and make sure that you're doing everything you can to complete the race safely. But but in general, I'm 100% in agreement with you, is that and the salt, if you take in too much salt, your body will just get rid of it.
Yeah.
That's what it, and a lot of people say I'm a salty sweater. Well, it's probably just because your diet's high in salt. It's not.
Probably because you have an adequate amount. Like, like I think I think if you're not a salty sweater, my personal thought is you probably over time your body the homeostasis has changed.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I was reading some literature. It was out of Australia, the Australian Institute of Sport, and they took just a ton of blood work on just a variety of athletes, and sure enough, the endurance athletes had the lowest blood sodium.
Interesting.
And why? Well, because they're out there doing just hours and hours more of sweating and not replacing, because their diet was the same as the track and field athlete or same as the basketball player.
Mm-hmm.
Probably, and so over time your body will adjust to what you've given it, right? Like, yes, your body is incredibly good at maintaining electrolyte balance in your plasma.
Yep.
Right? But over time, if you're consistently a little low, that becomes the new norm.
Yep.
So it's important that we do talk about that. We really should get a nutritionist on to talk.
We've done that a couple of times. I know people really enjoy hearing from our the sports nutrition expertise. So yeah, we should grab someone.
Yeah. Or any other tips you can think of between two races?
Between two races, yeah, I don't know. Just having all the logistics planned out, and we've spent that time with my wife and I just trying to figure out going from one place to the other, and having that worked out is just important because there's one less stress. Where are you going to stay? How are you going to get there? When are you leaving? We actually spent time on that before the first race to talk about both races. Again, not writing things in stone, but at least having, a target date that we would leave for Coeur d'Alene, having that worked out where we would go. That's a part that is just good to spend some time on.
John, the only other thing that I can really think of is, and we touched on it, but is not having to stick to a plan.
Mm-hmm.
No, I think a plan in between two tight races, and I know we talked about already, like, hey, it's easy to write it down, or it's easy to have a coach write it down for you. But this is probably the most critical time to listen to your body. More than any other time is between the two races. If you don't, you're gonna get behind the eight ball, and you're gonna be in. You're not gonna perform as well as you could. Right? And so if you have a coach, have good dialogue with the coach. If the coach is too aggressive during that time and you're not feeling like it's too much, you need to have a dialogue with that person. If you're coaching yourself, you need to give yourself a break and be like, hey, like, just because you wrote this plan before does not mean that it's going to go, like, it needs to go as planned. Or if you've done the exact same thing, like, let's say you've done this 70.3 and then 3 weeks later an Ironman, and you did this and it worked, it doesn't mean it's going to work this time.
Nope.
So I think you really need to listen to your body at this point more than any other time.
No, and that's great. I'm glad you mentioned the coaching part, because I know we're both self-coached, but I think this is the value in this type of area, to have a coach where it's, someone other than ourselves calling the shots, and they can look at it objectively.
But I also think you need to have a coach at this point that understands this.
Yeah.
Because many coaches that I know, they work with people and they're like, okay, we're going to do an Ironman in 6 months.
Yeah.
And they build. That's not that difficult of a thing. What you're trying to do, and to do well at both races, is something that if you don't have a really experienced coach that either has done this kind of thing themselves or has worked with many athletes that have done this, I think that this could be something that would be very difficult to understand.
I think you're right.
And because there's not that many people that do this, John. Like, we talk about the 1 percenters. You're in the 0.01 percenter of someone that's going to try and double like this.
Well, right before we started, we were talking about the pro athletes, and I finished, Hawaii 70.3, and I'm like, how do they run a 2:40 or even a sub-3 marathon in that type of environment? And the same thing, I'm amazed at the athletes that race a 70.3 one weekend and then crank out another one the very next weekend. Or
really fulls.
It's amazing.
I mean, it's a popular thing now for athletes. They do one build, they do a full, then they just basically take the week off and then do another full the next week.
Yeah.
And and it can work, and I think it can work in a pro athlete, right? But these athletes are so special.
Yeah, right.
We did start talking about that, but to understand, like, exactly what you said, to run under 3 hours at Kona, right? That is a special person.
Yeah.
And or to run a 1:10 half marathon in a 70.3.
That's unreal.
That is unreal. It's so special. And I think sometimes everyone's got their YouTube channels and everyone's got their blogs, and you sort of say, well, these guys can do it, I can do it. You're not that special.
Yeah. That's right.
And to think, well, I'm almost that special. No, you're not.
Yeah.
Because the difference between a 3:30 at Kona running and a 3 hours at Kona is, to me, it's like that person is 100% better than you.
Yep.
It's not that, oh, they're just a little bit better than me. It's like, it's like 10% faster. That 10%
is a lot.
Is a lot.
It's a big 10%. I guess if we're Yogi Berra, that 10% is a lot.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think that most age groupers, they need to recognize that. And and there's a reason why you're an age group triathlete, not a pro. Right? And maybe it's purely genetics, right? Like there's encodings for genes for collagen and the deposition of collagen, and some good research on this is like higher level athletes actually usually have the gene that they deposit more collagen. And so they can recover quicker. Right? Like if you don't happen to have the luck of the draw on some of these genetic predispositions, it is what it is.
Well, and I think matching ability and expectations helps make the race experience enjoyable.
Yes.
And I think, and you and I talked about this a little differently, where, as we go longer in triathlon, our expectations can change, and we're expecting to do better and better, or be competitive. But we reach a time where well, maybe we're not as competitive anymore. And I'm in that window, and that's hard. That becomes a different conversation. But yet, it's important for me to objectively look at where I'm at so that I can enjoy the race experience. Yeah. That if I'm still trying to be in the, top whatever position and I'm not, then that becomes a less enjoyable. Then I walk away and say, well, that wasn't a great race, but it may have been. But just like Hawaii, I was 18th. I wasn't even close to the front. But yet when I took a step back and I looked at it, I said, you know what, that's probably the best I raced in that heat and humidity in a long time. And so, I got to say, well, then that's good. I can enjoy that and enjoy that experience. I can wear the shirt with pride and all that. So it is important to match that.
I think one day we should have a conversation about that is when you do have times when you're not racing, I guess, as well as you did in the past.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a really hard thing. It's a hard pill to swallow.
Mm-hmm.
And both of us are, getting up there in age. You're a little faster than me.
In age, I'm fast.
In age. But there is a realization that, when you're in your 50s, you're not going to race as fast as you were when you were in your 20s. Right. And, and you're going to potentially have more difficulties along the way.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And probably more ups and downs.
Yeah.
Right? And how do you have that metric of, like, you had a successful race when you were 30 minutes slower than you were 5 years ago on the same course?
Mm-hmm.
And to me, it's like, I'm in the same kind of boat you are. It's hard to kind of wrap your head around that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we do need an episode where we talk specifically about how we deal with that and how you deal with that.
Yeah, no, that'd be fun. And you're going to get me talking about this area because it's sort of neat. I know Ken Glah, and some people may know that name, big time racer. He's actually done Kona now. Up until last year, I don't know what it is, like 37 or 38 times. As a pro, he didn't have to qualify early on, but he did eventually go age group, and he still has been able to qualify every year. So he's still able to do that. And what's interesting is he and I are in the same age group. Back in the day, I could not anywhere get close to him in a race. He was from the East Coast, so I'd see him at a lot of races that I would do. But now we're actually about 50-50 of me coming in front of him or him coming in front of me. But it's not because of speed. It's because it's attrition. It's whoever, came across something that they just couldn't solve that day, gut issue or what have you. And so it's interesting that he's been able to still do races and adjust his thinking. Yeah, that's fun. But yeah, and then at Hawaii, I was able to meet Mark Allen again and talk with him. And Dave Scott was actually on the course, on the run course at the halfway mark of each loop. And so that was neat to see the two of them at this race as well, and the two iconic athletes. And so,
that's awesome.
Yeah.
See, so you never know what you're going to get in a race. That's for sure. Well, John, I'm looking forward to obviously following you again in a couple weeks, and we'll talk again next Friday.
Okay, that sounds good.
Okay, have a great weekend and continue recovery / build.
Yeah, and stay injury free.
Exactly.
Hey, good talking, Ted.
Okay.
All right, bye.